Нет, рано, поторопился. Всем привет! Вы находитесь на канале студии Gamebox, и сегодня у нас очень интересный, нестандартный и без преувеличения, наверное,
Рано?
оскароносный. Какой? Это факт, это факт. Да. Оскароносный гость Пойя Шохани, специалист по VFX. И сегодня вместе с Жанной Травкиной, тоже замечательным человеком, который нас часто навещает и делится своим опытом, они расскажут, обсудят эту профессию, поделятся своим мнением. Для ребят-зрителей хочу отметить, вы сможете в процессе всего нашего мероприятия на YouTube писать свои вопросики в чатик трансляции, и я их буду передавать нашим спикерам, и в процессе, я надеюсь, они на какие-то из них поотвечают. Ну что ж, Жанна, тебе тогда передаю слово и удаляюсь в туман.
Хорошо. So, hi, Poya. How are you today?
Hi there. I'm well. How are you?
Well, actually awesome. I'm in Belgrade, and we have really, sunny spring. I'm super happy about it. And I'm
That's
super
great.
happy to meet you, actually. I was, of course, looking through your projects, and there are so many, and they are so cool. And I have so many questions, actually, for you, probably even more than we planned, but please don't be afraid.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and
Not to worry.
let's start. Actually, I also want to, to have a small talk, probably in the beginning. And as I said, I checked your projects at IMDb also. And yeah, you have Oscar for Gravity, but I also noticed that you worked on animation, movies, and like Romeo and Juliet, for example, yeah, something like that.
Yes.
And
Yes.
was it somehow different to work on animation movie than on like something like Gravity or Geostorm, something like that?
Yeah. I mean, there are always big differences between animation and live action. So, and different types of movies always you approach them differently. So with animation, there was a lot of pre-planning. We were experimenting with different animation styles. We were experimenting with different effects, how the effects, the water simulations are going to look inside of the animation, compared to when you do like a geostorm or a gravity, where it's based on realism. So you have to look at references that are real. So you try to find how real smoke behaves, how real rain behaves, and how it looks, and try to imitate that, compared to animation, where you have more creative freedom. The director of the animation usually has a certain style in their mind that they want to see. So there is always a big difference. Yeah.
Mhm. Well, sounds super interesting. And can you give a brief overview of what a VFX producer actually does? What responsibilities and tasks do they handle usually?
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of responsibility. I think a visual effects producer is pretty much a project manager, so they're in charge of all aspects of the project. And if you're working for a company, you're representing that company as well. I mean, just to dive into some of the responsibilities that a visual effects producer usually has. I mean, we're going from client communication, so handling the clients, emailing them, getting on calls with them, explaining to them when there's something wrong, or when there's something great and the team has come up with a great idea. It's all about creating a relationship between the client and yourself and your team. And you're representing your team as much as you're representing your company. From there on, you're also doing project management. Project management is managing the budgets, managing the legal side of it, going through contracts, hiring the right team, allocating the right shots to the right artists, understanding your artists, what is the strength of the artist, what is their weaknesses, and allocating shots in the right way to them. Also managing profits. So the profits of the project for the company you're working for are very important, and that's going to represent your reputation, how well you can manage and maintain the profits of a project compared to rather than just delivering the project. So there are many things that you have to balance and make sure there's constantly a balance there. Problem solving, I would say, is probably one of the biggest responsibilities and skills you need to have. Is constantly, every day, there will be some problems. And I think perhaps we'll discuss this a little bit later, but yeah, coming up with creative ways to solve problems is a huge part of being a visual effects producer. Other than that, it comes to negotiating new clients, negotiating terms with artists, and also managing budget. So sometimes the client wants more than what they've given to you. So you have to always manage the budget and make sure you can creatively come up with ways to meet the client's demands. So that's quite a broad spectrum of what a visual effects producer usually does.
Well, I see this profession requires a lot of skills, and I think it will be a really cool choice for people who love communicate, who love to handle a lot of different stuff at the moment, and at the end of the day, feel like a hero, like I solved everything, I am cool, this movie will be on time, something like that. What would you say?
It's true. I mean, there's you are in the middle of everything, and there's a lot of great things about it. You get to see movies before anyone else does. You get to meet with the directors. You sometimes get to meet with the cast, and really be as creative as you can be about certain ways, certain shots that can be achieved in different ways. So it's a lot of technical stuff, lots of creative aspects to it as well.
Mm-hmm. And well, I also want to probably clarify some terms for our audience. And we often hear terms like VFX, FX, SFX. Are they all referring to the same concept? If not, what are the distinction among them? What's the difference?
Sure. I mean, for visual effects, it's obviously everything we create digitally using computer softwares to generate hyper realistic visual effects, explosions, CG characters, set extensions. FX, or special effects, should we say, is more of the practical. So on set, we would create, add blood, actual practical blood spurts. So when someone gets shot, they click a button and he explodes in a certain way, and you do that on set, or you have on-set explosions to add more realism. For effects itself, the third term that you spoke about, that's a general term we use for getting some sort of an effect. So if the director wants an explosion in this scene, he'll say, okay, we want explosion effects in here. And then it's about having a discussion about whether that effect is going to be done with visual effects digitally, or it's going to be done practically. It just all depends on what the vision of the director is, and also how realistic the vision is, whether that can be done practically or digitally.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also, well, the use of visual effects is increasing all the time. For example, I remember the news of the last year when people were discussing, the TV series based on Tolkien's novel. I don't actually remember how this part, Silmarillion, probably, the book called, but doesn't matter. And in this series, they used like 2,300 CG shots. That's insane. That's a lot. So actually every year we see like there are more and more and more. Why this is happening and what kind of problems does VFX help to solve, well, in general for movie production?
Sure. So with visual effects, I mean, the reason you're seeing a lot more visual effects now is because we can bring bigger ideas, bigger dreams to life with visual effects. So directors are telling their stories how they see it, rather than being limited to technological advancement. I mean, we're very advanced now. So one of the reasons is because it allows a more creative freedom for the director and the producers to create exactly what they wanted, what they've seen. It enhances realism. So we're able to put digital, visual effects into films now that is very hard to tell whether it's real or it's not. Whether that's a CGI crowd in the background of a shot, or a tank close up to the camera exploding. All of these aspects can now be done in such hyper-realism that it's hard to tell the difference. So allows directors and producers to create things that were otherwise almost impossible to do before. With technological advancements as well, I mean, where we are now with AI and artificial intelligence, we are going to be seeing an ever-growing change in the industry. Films are going to be using AI and VFX. I think a combination of both is something myself and my company right now we're looking at heavily, is using artificial intelligence to solve some of these creative ideas rather than the visual effects. And there are some shots where we are combining utilizing AI and visual effects to achieve even a more realistic, even better results than what we were able to do 2 to 3 years ago. And I think with the advances of technology, more and more people have now access to the same powers that top-end top-end directors in Hollywood have access to as well. So the power that was in their hands before, let's say 10 years ago, is now in the hands of us, in the hands of the people, and we are able to create, I think, striking images, amazing videos, using the same techniques for a lot less money. Now, the problems that visual effects has been solving over the years is removing this barrier, this limitation for many people, as we discussed earlier. Many films used to be very location bound. So you had to go to America to shoot this scene, you had to go to China to shoot this scene, then you had to go to Berlin, and so on and so forth. Now, technology is so advanced that in a single studio, we're able to put the actors in almost any location in the world. Now, there are still some limitations, but if done correctly, you can remove those limitations as well. So it solved a lot of problems in terms of where, we can take a creative project and where it can go now compared to where it could go 10 years ago and where it could go 20 years ago, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much. And I also have another one, a little bit probably philosophical. Our students are always arguing, do we create like art, or is our job is like super technical? What would you say about your industry? Yes, creating VFX for the movie. Is it more about some creativity, art, stuff like that? Is it technical realization, or probably there is creativity in technical realization? What's your opinion?
I think in terms of, I mean, it's a very good question. For visual effects artists in general, in visual effects, I think it's more artistic in what we create, but it really depends on what they're creating. So if it's a concept artist, they are very creative. They're artistic in what they create. If it's effects with technicals, I mean, you're in the middle of both. You're creating something that's super artistic, and at the same time, it's super technical. But I think there's a big movement in our industry where artists are becoming more and more artistic, and perhaps less technical because the softwares are helping with the technical side. So before, when I first started off in the industry, you either were artistic or you were technical because there was so much to learn on both sides. Now, I think the artists are more creative and less reliant on being technical because you have, especially now, today, you have artificial intelligence integrated into Maya, into Houdini, into Nuke. So it allows it allows the artist to create, freely be more creative and allow the AI to assist them with the technical aspects. So yeah.
Well, and what would you say, about the industry in general? What I heard, and also what I get from the news, is that now we have, well, a lot of different options to go into the industry because now computer graphics in general and VFX are, well, really everywhere. But at the same time, there are not so many specialists, actually. There are many, but still it's kind of easy to get into the industry. And if you will be thinking for a year, 3, 5, it will be much harder. So, what do you think? Is there any truth in this theory or not?
But there is some truth to what you've mentioned there. I think in terms of artists are becoming more generalists. You're required to know more about everything rather than being more specialized. I mean, it's still right now there are still a lot of niches. You have effects artists, animators, riggers, you have modelers, but I think over the next 5 years, those very people are going to also require to know more about other departments because the softwares will be handling so much more of the work that, for instance, to give you an example, match moving, which is tracking of the shots. So taking real life footage and building 3D data from it, then giving that 3D data over to animators, layout artists, modelers, effects people to add all the effects in. Now that entire department from match move, roto, even paint are almost completely replaced by AI and technology. So that's already caused a lot of, not entirely, but I would say 80% it's there. A lot of companies don't need to outsource those level of work anymore. They can do it in-house. So those artists that specialize in those areas now need to learn about other departments and how they can become more generalists and be able to do other works other than just that specific match move or roto. So because of that, there is a shift, and that's going to happen to almost every other department. Over the next 5 years, there will be rapid changes in the industry.
So I would say now is actually really perfect time to jump into it and start your career. So
Absolutely.
before drastic changes, and also, it's kind of when you know nothing at all, it's easy, well, kind of easy to learn different things. Your brain are not, tied to some specific pipeline you created for like 5 years, and probably in some way it's much easier to learn from scratch like now than actually to rebuild everything. And with AI tools, it's what's happening. I know that, well, senior artists in different spheres in VFX and in CG, they sometimes cry out of pain because they need to relearn, and sometimes it's really harder.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's a great time to jump into the industry because you will be learning the new way of doing visual effects. I think that's probably the better way of putting it, is the new way of doing visual effects compared to how we approach visual effects perhaps even 3 years ago, where we were still using the older kind of system. So it is causing a lot of trouble for artists now. It's causing a lot of pain for them because whatever you've learned, even if you've had 15, 20 years of experience in this industry, the changes that are happening now, and if you're not training yourself and to be up to date and how to use the latest techniques, how to utilize AI to make your work more efficient, you will be left behind very quickly. I've had many artists that I've worked with, my company has hired, that their roles very quickly became irrelevant, not necessary for us to maintain them, because they were not up to date with the latest techniques, how to use AI to make work more efficiently, that would allow us to deliver the work faster, that would allow us to be more competitive with our other companies that we compete with. So from an employer perspective, it's very important for us to maintain a competitive edge. And to do that, we need to work with artists that are always training themselves, always ahead of the game. And when we require something to be delivered faster, they're able to compensate for that. And that's very easy for me to say from a visual effects producing side. And it's more pressure on the artist. But the reality is, if you're not up to date, sooner or later, in the next year or 2 or 3 years, people much younger, much more much less experienced than you, will be able to replace your job because they are learning methods and techniques that are using new technology. Yeah, there is a balance, but it is the best time to start learning now, rather than waiting for later.
Yeah. And actually, how did you begin your career?
Oh, for me, I started way back in 2009, so 15 years ago now, give or take. I started off as a runner. I mean, I started off as doing Maya with technical directing first, so that was my sort of qualification to get into the industry. I applied for all the major studios after I finished my studies. No one was taking juniors at the time. I was trying to create a portfolio. It was very difficult to get into the industry without a good portfolio. I landed my first job as a runner, so someone who would bring coffee and food for the artist, for the clients of the studio, to come in early morning and make sure all the kitchens have bread, coffee, everything is taken care of, everything is neat, cleaning everything. So that was my first job in the industry, my foot into the door. It wasn't what I obviously expected, but I had to start somewhere. And I was very keen to get, to start speaking to the department I really wanted to work in, and that was with that was in the effects department. So I started off with effects as an effects artist myself. So as a runner, I started speaking with the lead effects on the film called John Carter, and over a 2-month period, I built a relationship with the effects lead. Every day I would go, "Oh, what techniques are you using here? Oh, that looks great. How did you achieve this? I would have done it in such a way." So when a position for a junior effects came up, I took that position, and they gave me that position. Because I built that relationship. And with that, I was able to also bring the rest of my team from the degree of Maya technical directing that I did, bring the rest of my team in as well. And we started a very small group of effects team where we were able to take small visual effects scenes from John Carter and begin working on them. And that team started to grow bigger and bigger. From John Carter, we went on to, we were hired after that to work on Gravity with Framestore. So that was the second big job that we ended up doing as a team. And that was the beginnings of our company, AMG Media Group. And after Gravity, obviously Gravity did so well, and we were working with Framestore, and the recognition that we got with the winning of an Oscar for the best visual effects, that really boosted the company's reputation. So many other studios began working with us. We began, over the years, we began delivering 30, 40 film projects. We opened up a company in Abu Dhabi. We had a basis in the US. And it grew very, very fast. And up until 2020, we were doing very well. So we worked on animations, feature films, and so have you. And then in 2020, obviously with COVID, it became very difficult because the whole industry shut down. And eventually we ended up selling the company on in 2021. And now I'm more of we started off a company called Black Deer Entertainment, a new entity recently where we are investing into films and providing visual effects services for our own feature films, as well as client visual effects for client projects. So that's how I came about. I probably spoke too much, but yeah, that's
That's super interesting. And I actually have a question. You mentioned Maya, so you worked in Maya. And my question is, how often Maya crashed back in 2009? Was it like more times than it crashes now, or it was worse?
I think we were told always save your work every 10, 15 minutes or every half an hour, save your work, just save. So I got into, I think I had like hundreds of saves per scene, just to make sure I'm not, but so many crashes. I've had artists who grabbed their PCs and smashed them to the floor because they forgot to save 6, 7 hours of work. And these are very senior individuals, so it used to crash a lot. It still crashes a lot. I would say it used to crash more back then, perhaps. Computers are more powerful now, so they provide more memory and power, but it still crashes. So I've seen artists even recently getting very angry with Maya, Houdini as well, and many other.
And Unreal actually as well. It crashes like hell sometimes.
Oh yes, I mean all of these softwares. Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say all of these softwares, they do crash. They do have tendencies of crashing, but that's okay. That's just when you. I think they're much better now. I mean, like I said, computers are much more powerful. They can handle a lot more. It's when your computers were not so powerful and we would load gigabytes of data suddenly into one scene. You have, to give you an example, there was when we were working on X-Men Days of Future Past, we had all of New York as a 3D model into Maya, and it just used to cause huge crashes. So what we did was break it into smaller sections for each scene, and then give that back to the artist so that the computers could handle those processes a lot better. So, but now those computers, are much stronger and can handle more. So every software still crashes, but they're less often as compared to before.
And I also know that you had before your career in movie industry and VFX, you had experience as a stuntman. Did it help somehow in VFX later or not? Was it hard to switch between the industries? It's
So
like two
yeah, I mean,
different.
that experience is interesting. I mean, I started doing stunt work very early. I think close to 16, 14, 16 years old. We started doing small short films. I was with a group of me and my friends. We started to do stunt work. We were gymnasts, acrobats. But what that experience gave to me was the experience of understanding how production works. Because eventually we ended up doing, more feature films. We were behind the camera. So on John Carter was actually my last film as a stunt person or as a special extra, because I ended up damaging my knees during training whilst we were shooting. So that was the last film I did. But it helped me understand how these visual effects that I'm doing are going to add value to what production is doing and how production is setting up their scenes for visual effects. So it helped me really understand that relationship between production and post-production, especially before they were very separate. Even now, it's still quite separate, but everything in film is starting to become almost into one. But before it was very separate. You had production, you had post and VFX, and the only connection there was between the companies and the data that was transferred from onset to the post. Now you have more visual effects people on set. So you have a VFX supervisor, VFX producers, you have coordinators, you have, and they were there before, but I think now they're becoming more involved in the production production because of the amount of visual effects required now compared to before.
Mhm. And could you discuss what actually is the essential knowledge and skills a VFX producer must have? And specifically, what's his role in VFX project? So, like, is he like the most important person in the world, or something else?
Yeah, a good question. I mean, I'll go over the kind of a full understanding of what a visual effects producer really does and what skills they really require on a day-to-day basis to manage multi-million-dollar projects, manage projects like Hollywood projects. Let's start with perhaps on the technical side. So a visual effects producer doesn't need to know the visual effects software so much as the artists know, but a good and an effective visual effects producer understands how each software can be worked in order to create a more efficient workflow of projects. So how to deliver on certain shots. So from my effects background, when I look at an effects shot, I look at it from an artist perspective almost, as well as from a management perspective. I'll try to figure out who would be best to appoint this to, what methods would be approach this. So would it be via Houdini? Would be work between Houdini and Maya? Or are there other softwares that we can look at, like RealFlow, depending on the type of effects? And then begin discussing those with the VFX supervisor and so on and so forth. So having some knowledge of the softwares and how those softwares can help achieve the final goal of what is required for each shot is good to have. It's great to also obviously have you as a visual effects producer, you are looking at the entire visual effects pipeline from beginning to end. You're on top of it. So you're not necessarily, perhaps you're not the most important person, but you are an important person to the whole process, because you're managing the client's expectations, you're also managing the teams, and you're also managing the deadlines and deliveries and the budget and the profit margin. So you're making sure all of these aspects are constantly in a balance. And every day is something new. Every day you're realizing, okay, this is not working. How can we quickly make fast-paced decisions to solve this to solve these problems? So having the technical understanding of some visual effects softwares, understanding how your visual effects pipeline from start to end comes together is very, very crucial. The next part of it, which is more on the management of the client side, is the more of the business and management skills that you require to have as a visual effects producer. So it's much like running your own business. So anyone who is an entrepreneur who has run their own business will understand that you need to be always on top of the projects, budgeting the projects from the very beginning. So you have a client that comes to you and says, I have X amount of money and there is X amount of shots, and here's a list of those shots for my film projects or commercial or TV series. And you need to figure out, can your company, because every company is going to be different, every company has their own prices for compositing, for effects and so on. Usually on an artist level, you don't see that. You come in with your rate, whether your rate is acceptable by management, they hire you. But as management side, there is a completely different price to what the company charges the clients. So you need to have a very good understanding of what those prices are and to build a database for that. Then how can you deliver this project if you are going to deliver this project? How budgeting the project correctly and hiring the right people for the correct rates and also maintaining the profit margins. It's a fine balance. So before you begin the project, the management and business skills come into place where you're negotiating contracts with the client. So the client may say, I only have 100,000. You're saying, well, the total amount of work is 150,000. So there's a 50,000 difference. But there are always ways to make things work. Unfortunately, that pressure, not only does it fall into the producer, but the producer has to put that pressure back into the team if the company decides to take that and make sure the team, the artists, are delivering on that. So there's always this fine balance of understanding these sets of skills. The next set of skills that you require is the creative and communication skills. So being able to communicate with your artist or with your company, the company you're working for, with management, or whether that's with the client and communicating that. These are very important. You have to always maintain your cool. You can't get too angry with something. You can't show your emotions. You have to always listen. I think one of the most important things for a visual effects producer is to listen to your artist, is to listen to higher management, is to listen to your clients before you react, before you decide whether they're wrong or they're right. Is always listening and understanding the whole concept of it. To some extent, we always joke about this with other producers we work with. We're kind of like therapists towards our artists, because the artists usually are frustrated with the crazy deadlines that we have to give to them, or because of their softwares crashing, you have to calm them down and speak to them and bring them back into the game and make sure they feel valued, that they are working as a team and that they are valued in the eyes of the producers and the company. At the same time, we are working with the clients to make sure that we are giving them what they want, the quality that they want, storytelling. So sometimes the clients want you to work with them to make sure you come up with the way the shot is or the way that their story is to help them figure out a few things. So I think being able to telling stories and working with clients in that respect, creative respect, is very important for a producer as well. And visual communication. So visual communication is almost like coming up with briefs, project briefs, how you would, for instance, a client comes to you and they ask you for a treatment of how your company is proposing to tackle the visual effects shots in their film. So you would create a treatment, and that treatment is going to be in a visual style and design. You would work with a designer to come up with a very impressive presentation for the client and for higher management in your company. That's how you build your portfolio as a producer, is to impress your client and impress your higher management. Therefore, it's not like a visual effects artist where your portfolio is what you can create. It's rather, how can you save money? How can you tell the story visually? How can you present your ideas? And how well can you maintain your team and their confidence in you to protect them while they're doing their work. So I think creative and communication skills are, again, another important aspect. We did speak about the kind of additional skills being problem solving. So that goes into listening to your artist, management, or your client, firstly, so you have to understand the full problem that you're about to solve before you answer them with a solution. That's very, very important. Attention to detail. And I don't mean attention to detail necessarily on when you're in a review room, you're looking at the artist and you're paying attention to different details. That's one part of it. But attention to detail in the emails that you're writing, the emails that you receive, how you communicate to clients, artists, and management, paying attention to what has been said in meetings. These are very important aspects as well of a visual effects producer. You have to take note of everything so you understand everything from a very top perspective. Is very important. Team management, I've got two more parts to mention. Team management, as I said, managing your team, listening to them, understanding their worries and their concerns, taking into consideration if an artist tells you this shot is not going to happen in the 2 days that you, as producers, we have put 2 days for this to be achieved. They turn around and say, this can't be achieved in 2 days. This is going to take 1 week. That means 5 days, 5 to 7 days, this is going to take. So that's an additional days added to a shot that you have budgeted for only 2 days. So it's about listening to them and going, okay, I understand. How can we try to achieve it in 2 days? Is there a way we can break this shot down into 2 parts or 3 parts and have 2 or 3 other artists who have extra time on their hands to help support you finish and deliver this shot? Or do we allocate days from another shot that can be done? So we have a shot that we've budgeted for 4 days, but it can actually be done in 2 days. That means we have an additional 2 days from another shot that we can allocate into here and do the same from other shots, so that eventually this shot that's instead of 2 days is going to take 5 days. Now we've made it work on the schedule basis. So it's about working with the artists, listening to them, understanding them, because they are the ones on the ground working away on the shot, and they understand. They have a deeper understanding of how these softwares are, and their experience and their skill sets are able to deliver on what you expect them to. So managing the team, listening to them is one thing, and protecting your team from management. So in many companies, you'll have top management which don't really understand how perhaps even visual effects in itself comes together, how much pressure artists are under. So you'll have a managing director maybe, or chief of finance officer, or lawyers who will question, oh, why has some things taken longer? Or they will come to you to ask whether we require a certain amount of artists to be working on this project. Can we lower them? Can we let go of a few and add the rest of the shots that those were meant to do onto the lesser amount of artists? So it's your job as a visual effects producer to protect your team and go, no, we require this amount of artists because they are, as we've scheduled them, because we require them because of all these technical reasons, because of all these creative reasons. And in order to meet our scheduling, we require this amount to help deliver the show. So you are in between the artist and management. You are there to protect the team, as well as try to show the team that, okay, I'm under pressure from higher management because the client is putting pressure on me and higher management to deliver this section of the film faster. Therefore, let's work together to come up with a way to deliver the show faster. So you are always in the middle of everything, and you're managing everyone and listening to everyone. It sounds like a lot, but it's fun once you get into it. It's you're managing high level projects, you're dealing with major A-list directors or producers, and you're making a big name of yourself in the industry. So there are a lot of rewards for it. But yeah, it does take a lot of management skills.
Whole job. Me myself, I'm a general creative producer, but I'm not in the movie industry. I'm in advertising, so I really get what you're talking about. So yeah, sometimes it's mess all around, and you're the only person who can somehow make it work. But it's super rewarding, it's interesting, and what I also actually love about producer job is that I also came, from production. I know how to model, I know how to post-prod, but at some point I realized that to make the project I dream about, I will need to learn Maya, Houdini, I don't know, Unreal, something on top, probably learn how to draw, how to concept. And I realized that I can't do this like technically. My life is too short, even if it will be too long. And as a producer, you, with the hands of other people, can actually realize your big dreams and big ideas. And I think that's also super cool and rewarding part of this profession.
Correct. I mean, working with directors to come up with visions for how they want these shots done, and I mean, just recently on another major project that we're working on, working with the producers to come up with a very difficult creative aspect of the film. So sitting down with the director and the producers, coming up with different ideas with our team and their team on how we can deliver this is super rewarding, because you're working, your work ends up being there. Even though the artists are delivering that, you're part of that creative process as much as you're part of making sure that that film would not have happened if it wasn't for your management. So there is a lot of pride in the work that I think we do as producers, creative producers, film producers, line producers. There's a lot of pride for the work that we do.
Yeah, true. And now we're kind of talking about grown-up producers. And if we look to juniors, what actually they should know, what skills do they need to have at least to enter the industry? Because I'm pretty sure that nobody will give them, I don't know, accounting part or handling something with management, because they're too green, too young, and do not have all the skills. But what do they actually do as if you are a junior producer? What tasks, what skills?
So in terms of skills for juniors, I think it's good to have organizational skills. Showing that you can organize your work is very crucial. How you label everything, naming conventions, I think that's one thing. Having people skills. So if you're a people's person, you get along with people, then producing could be a job for you. if you're not a people's person, then it's going to be quite a bit of a difficult job, because every day you're interacting with people. You are going into meetings and setting up meetings with 10 people and sometimes 30, 40 people, or sometimes 2 or 3 people. But every day, I mean, I have meetings 5, 6, 7, 8 times a day. And on top of that, I'm trying to manage everything else. So I think as a junior, people skills is very important. Being able to communicate your ideas on visually, so on paper, having some sort of a design skill is crucial and important, to be able to convey your ideas, not just on words, but visually as well. Going online, using AI tools now to bring what you think is right to life and putting that into a document. I think in terms of budgeting, you're absolutely right. You can't trust perhaps junior producers with a lot of budget, but having some sort of an understanding of what profits are, how profits are calculated, understanding how rates of artists compared to the rates of the company are, all of these kind of information that you can learn if you come in. Once you come in as a VFX junior into a role, you learn from the senior producers. But I think people skills, organization skills, communication skills, and a bit of design and understanding of the VFX is crucial. So I think these 4 are very crucial for you to have a good career. And obviously, loving movies, loving creativity, watching other producers produce great work, learning about them, talking to them, or going online and seeing how these films were made. So you begin to understand how something from pre-production goes into production, and from production it goes into post-production, and in the end delivering. So there's a lot of videos online that do show that as well, but having hands-on experience from someone from the industry is something that you can't replace. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. And well, okay. And how actually the work on a VFX project looks like? Like Spielberg comes into the room and says, like, guys, I need some cool effects here. Come up with something. So really, how it looks like in real life. So what
So
stages?
you're talking about the stages, right? You're talking about
Yeah,
pre-production, production,
yeah,
and post. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
How
So
that really works.
yeah, I mean, to go through that, we usually we look at a project, start with a script. So me and my team, we would get a script from a producer or a director. And firstly, these projects that you get are usually fully financed, meaning they are ready to go into pre-production, and they're looking for a company and a set of creative individuals, like a visual effects producer, VFX coordinator, VFX supervisors, to come on board to their project to guide them through all the visual effects aspects of the film. So it starts with a script. You would take the script, and based on the script, you create the first initial budget. And the first initial budget is always going to be higher than what the final budget is, because the script will always have certain things that perhaps will not be shot, or it will have, you won't be able to tell how many shots are going to be. So if it's a explosion in the script, it will say there's an explosion. In the film, they might be showing this explosion from 6 different angles, and each angle may have different visual effects attached to it. So one is very close up, the other one is an explosion that is actually affecting a car, and the car is flipping from the other angle. So all of these are visual effects scenes. Then your budget either increases or decreases. But you always start with budgeting and the script. From there, you begin working with the director to build concept and storyboarding. You start storyboarding the different scenes, how the camera angles are going to be situated, whether it's going to be a low angle, for instance, showing a building that's collapsing. You show 3 angles of that maybe before it cuts to the characters talking and the next scene. So that means those 3 are going to be, one is going to be from a low angle. So we're going to have the building collapsing down, all the windows shattering and falling. So you're going to storyboard all of these aspects. Once you storyboard everything, you begin to understand what is going to be VFX, what is going to be done in production. And based off of that, you go, and this is all still pre-production, you go into building assets and designing assets that the director will approve prior to going into production. Some of these designs, some of these 3D models and assets may even be partially created in as pre-production, as an actual model, physical model they will hold in production. So if it's a creature, you will design this 3D creature with concept art and 3D wise, and then based on those sketches and assets, they will create a practical one where they would use it in production, and in post-production, we would actually put the 3D model over it. So that's pre-production. That's kind of the stage there. Moving into live production, so actual set on set, where a visual effects supervisor, VFX producer, and perhaps a VFX coordinator will be present. And everything will be scheduled, so you are not going to be there for a full 2 months of shoot. You will maybe be there for 10 or 15 days of that shoot, where you're required, where they're going to be shooting the visual effects scenes. So you will be present on those days to make sure it's all captured correctly, all the data is done correctly. You work with as a VFX producer, you will work with the visual effects supervisor to come up with the correct way to capture this footage. You work with the director to make sure that data is transferred to the studios correctly and all the data is gathered correctly. So that's live action filming. In terms of then there are other aspects where we do motion capture or animation. So if you're going to production for animation, then you do motion capture, where you will have motion capture actors available, then you will have motion capture experts, and as a visual effect producer and coordinator, you will be there to make sure they're doing each scene correctly, the timings are correctly, and the data is transferred to the team correctly. All of this is crucial for a VFX producer to be handling and managing. At the same time, whilst we're in production, there may be certain simulations and effects that we will also be looking at with the team. We will be working with the production producers and your team to go back and forth and, to see whether this major effects that's happening, how big on the screen it looks, and working with your artists back in the studio and seeing what kind of simulations they're able to create to match what is on set versus what is in creation. So that's all in, I would say, in production. That's what we're looking at capturing. Now, when it goes to pre-production, this is where all of the plates that have been shot during production are handed into the post-production and visual effects companies, where they begin editing, color grading, adding the animation, adding the set extensions, and all of the other aspects of post and VFX. You as a VFX producer are then you completely take over managing all of that. Whereas on set, your job is primarily to focus on the shots that require VFX and work with the VFX supervisor to make sure they're done correctly. Then when it comes to post, that's all you. So everything we've spoken about until now in this webinar about the responsibilities of a visual effects producer, that's where everything falls. One thing I think to add to is the rotoscoping, match move, and paint work that usually you work with a vendor. So as a visual effects producer, over the years of work you do, you will build relationships with certain companies that will produce very specific work. So once you're finished with production, or they come to you with this project only on the VFX side, you will allocate not only hiring the right team of compositors and 2D and 3D artists, but also hiring the right companies to handle other aspects of the project. So you're removing a lot of pressure from your artists and letting other expert companies handle the match move, the paints, the rotos, perhaps even feature animation specialists. It all depends on how big of a studio you're working for. It all depends on what speciality that studio does. So you may be working for a creature effects company, meaning that's their specialty. What is not their specialty is everything else, and you outsource that work. So you build relationships. I think is a very crucial part of as a VFX producer as well.
Mhm. Oh, and do you probably have any example of VFX being applied in movies, TV series that you can share? I think that's also will add.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about advancements in technology for films, or where effects have been applied for films.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, there are examples. There is the film. I think if we look at Ben-Hur, Ben-Hur, the film, was created 3 times over the last 100 years, 100 or so years, 3 times. So you had I believe it was 1925, first one, where it was in black and white, and they did the big chariot scene with the horses, and they hired thousands of extras to be in the Colosseum to make it real. Then you have the 1959 version, where in terms of cinematography techniques, they were more advanced. So the chase, this chariot scene, was done more epically. It was delivered, more shots, more cool scenes of the action was able to be captured compared to the 1925. But they still hired thousands of extras to be in the audiences and to be the guards and all of that. So, it was huge production budgets we're talking about. Then you fast forwarded to the 2016 version of Ben-Hur, where this was done pretty much. I mean, most of it was done in a studio. You didn't hire thousands and thousands of extras. You hired perhaps 100 extras. The rest of the crowds were replaced by CG crowds, CG environments. You had the action sequences were a lot more in depth. You had camera angles that couldn't have been achieved without the technological advances. So there is an example of a film over 100-year period which was made 3 times, and you can clearly see the advancements of technology and where visual effects was not present to where visual effects is present, and how much more freedom it gave the director to be able to capture bigger epic scenes in that. So yeah.
Mhm. And actually, if we talk about software, with artists, it's more or less understandable. It's like Houdini, it's Maya, or other modeling tool, Unreal Engine probably. Yeah, what else? Well, Nuke. Yeah, so from some new stuff, it's probably AI tools. But if we talk about VFX-producer, with what software these guys are working with? So is there any specific stuff?
Yeah, I mean, software-wise for visual effects producer, so it depends on how big of a studio you're working with, but usually in UK, in America, we work with a project management system called Shotgun, or Shotgun would be the name that I think ShotGrid is another name that we use for it. It's a project management tool that we use where we upload various different shots. We're able to manage the schedules for our artists. We manage the delivery dates for each shot. We are able to plan the entire project and also upload for each project the images, the videos, the plates, and link them into the visual effects pipeline. So we use ShotGrid, Shotgun quite often. We also use for communication between artists and teams, we tend to use Slack quite a lot. Now there are other communication softwares that different companies use. I'm quite used to using Slack. It's a good software. You can control it. You can monitor everyone there and exchange a lot of information there. So it's quite a good software. Another, I would say, an older way of doing things would be using Excel. As a visual effects producer, you have to become very good at Excel. And right now with AI, you can become good at Excel quite quickly. You can ask it to give you formulas that before we had to search the whole internet for it, or work with, or call friends that are good with it and ask them, how would you come up with a formula for me to calculate X, Y, and Z. But now technology is assisting us a lot more. So using Excel to come up with very complex project management sheets where we manage our artists, we manage our budgets, we manage our delivery dates, we manage our profit margins. We can create, as visual effects producers, and especially as you become more senior, you have to be able to create very complex Excel sheets that the finance department is able to look at and understand where finances are, where you're in the project, therefore you've spent X amount so far and so forth. And HR is able to look at the Excel sheet as well and understand how many people you've hired, when are they booked in from? Are they booked in from January 1st to June the 2nd? And do they need to extend that period because now the project has been extended? So you are creating Excel documents that literally every other department in the company is also able to look into and understand where your project is. So from a junior level perspective, I would say it's great to start learning Excel, learning how to work with AI, and begin creating some form level of project management documents. And as you get better and as you progress in your career, you begin to create things that are monstrously big. And you're creating systems almost for companies that they will use even after you leave that company. They will continue to use those systems because your job is to create simple yet complex Excel documents that everyone is able to tap into. Or communication and collaboration between, as a visual effects producer, your team and vendors, you want them to kind of work together. So if you are uploading some frames and show, you can write comments. They can re-upload work that they've done onto Frame.io. Right now, Frame.io is also being used during production. So it would be straight from the camera into I/O. So the cameras are now uploading data almost immediately into Frame.io. So as a form of communication between vendors, between the production team, we're using Frame.io nowadays more and more and more. In terms of making sure that your team is versioning, meaning naming your scenes more complex, making sure they're not too complex, so your team is delivering their projects with the right naming convention. So you as a visual effects producer have to make sure the data between what the artists are producing and what your pipeline requires matches. There's usually a lot of problems in this area. If there are VFX producers here or VFX coordinators, always make sure you're focusing on the naming conventions between different departments, so lighting department, effects department, match move, roto, and so on, and between what your pipeline, so pipeline TDs, technical directors for your pipeline, they are usually able to create softwares and tools that makes your artist job easier. But in order for them to do that, there needs to be a correct way of naming all of your files in the same way. So when they create a tool that does something that helps the lighting department, that they've named their scenes, their assets in the right way that allows pipeline to do that. So it's very important that you maintain that relationship as a visual effects producer. Now, in terms of budgeting and scheduling tools, again, Excel is something that I use quite often, but we also use other softwares such as ShotGrid is, again, we use that to kind of understand our schedule. There is also Monday. Monday is another system that we do use. Some studios use Monday, some don't. Monday is just another sort of team management. You manage your times there, you manage your kind of project delivery dates and so on. But Monday is more used between yourself and higher management and perhaps other departments. Now, in terms of, so yeah, I hope that answered your question for what softwares VFX producers kind of need to know. But in terms of management, those are the softwares you need to know. In terms of simulations, creative aspects, you need to have some understanding, much like you have in terms of design tools, and I have in terms of Maya and Houdini. We do need to have some understanding of how these softwares operate. You can always, as a VFX producer, I always advise people to go online and watch what Maya 3D Autodesk has, what the new features are, and get some of your team to experiment with those tools, these new tools. And if they work well, that means you now have a more efficient tool to deliver certain parts of your work more efficiently. So it's always good as a visual effects producer to be up to date with how new tools for different softwares are coming out, when they're coming out, and can you get your teams to begin experimenting with them. So that goes for Nuke, that goes for Mari, Substance Painter, Houdini, Maya, ZBrush, and many other softwares. I highly advise VFX supervisors to keep themselves up to date with where the industry is going on those softwares.
And well, if we talk about portfolio, for example, there is a beginner producer, and he wants to gather the first folio somehow, how he should actually approach it, what he should show there. I think that's a big question. It's when you're an artist, it's so easy. Yeah, you created, I don't know, a monster. Here is your monster. You can show modeling, everything. Yeah, and when you are, producer, how to actually handle this part?
So as a resume, you're, speaking earlier on, your job is to manage profits, manage your teams, and again, as you go from a junior producer, you handle smaller teams. As you become more of a senior VFX producer, you handle much larger teams and you handle more projects at the same time. So I think the things that are important for a VFX producer's resume and how to build their portfolio is to become very good at managing people, because you're one of the things you write on your resume is manage teams of up to 100 people, of up to 150 people, of up to 20 people. So management of people is very important. Management and management of budget sizes. So as you grow, the budget sizes of your projects grow as well. So you go from a £20,000 or $20,000 project, all the way to a $1.5 million project, all the way to a $4 million project, and all the way to an $8 million project. Your experience, as you grow through your experience, so does the amount of work you do, the amount of budget you handle, the amount of team you handle, and the amount of responsibility. So in a portfolio, you need to explain how many people you've managed in this company, how many, what's the budget that you've managed. So if it's 10,000 to 20,000 or 10,000 to 40,000 or so on and so forth, you need to mention that. You need to mention about profit, how you manage your profits. So usually a visual effects producer would work with the finance department and the legal department to make sure you're calculating the profits correctly, you're calculating weekly expenditure correctly. If there is any, suddenly the client tells you there is more work to be done, you need to immediately go back to the drawing board and come up with, okay, if we are to do this, they only have 10,000 to do it, but they're asking us to do 30,000. How can we make this work? You talk with management, you talk with finance. So all of these skills you need to list them in your portfolio. You need to list that you work with the legal to come up with, to manage the budgets. You create weekly reports for finance. You work with higher management. Your organizational skills. Again, what softwares are you good with? Are you good with Shotgun? Are you good with F-Track? F-Track is another project management software. Are you, what type of projects do you do? Because there are different types of producers. There's a creative producer. There is the film producers. There are VFX producing, but the VFX producing can also be for, are you primarily working animation? Or have you done both animation and live action? So it's very important to mention these in your resume. What type of experience do you have on what type of projects? Another thing to add to your resume is, let's say in 2023 to 2024, you've worked on 10 projects. You need to show links to whether it's a film, and you can put the trailer. So you say, I worked on this film. And we worked on 30 shots, we worked on 600 shots. You were in charge of 900 shots. You need to mention per project how many shots you worked on. So when an employer looks at your portfolio, understands, okay, great, this is the final result of their work. This is how many shots they did. And the responsibilities, they managed 30 people, 40 people. You need to say that you also are good at communicating and negotiating. So if you did negotiate the deal with the client or for the company you're working with, you need to mention that. Client negotiation is a skill. Or if you haven't done that, don't mention that, because an employer will ask you, how did you negotiate the contract with the client? So it's important as a VFX producer, you also, as you grow through your career, understand the legal aspects as well. So if I'm working in the UK, or if I'm working in the US, or I'm working in another country, I need to understand the legal aspects of how to put that contract together and negotiating with the client on a price that is good for you and good for them. And then making sure in the contract that which is very important, and I've seen this happen many, many times, you have to review the contract very carefully to make sure you are protecting your company, the company you're working for, and you're protecting your team in this contract. You want to make sure that the client is not free to do anything and ask for everything. You're limiting the amount of revisions that they are allowed to have. You're limiting the amount of, you're identifying the end date. So you're saying this project is to end August 3rd. And if it goes past August 3rd, then there will be extra charges. You need to make sure you're covering your company and yourselves when this contract is going out, and you're not leaving anything for the client to be able to take advantage of you later. So again, another aspect of what VFX producing is also understanding the legalities of putting these contracts together. So for your resume, those are very important features to mention in there.
Mhm. And well, if we talk about the clients, what advice you would give? How to handle them? What are, like, the no, what you should never ever do with clients communication?
So handling clients, and you're going to have, as a VFX producer, you will come across many different types of clients. Some clients will be easy. There won't be that many of them, but there are some out there. There are some clients that are going to be difficult because they don't understand the visual effects process. So you, as a visual effects art producer's job is to also educate the client about the processes of what your company has to do in order to deliver what they're requesting. So it's about listening to, firstly, again, goes back to listening to the client, understanding what their pain is, what it is that they're trying to achieve, what it is their goal, what quality and level of expectations that they have. So setting expectations with the client, so the client can't expect you to deliver a job in a week. You need to come back and say, great, this job is going to take 3 months, and we're going to show you the first stage in the first week of the second month, and then we're going to have another review in the fourth week or the third week of the second month, and so on. So you need to set expectations from the very beginning. So again, this is creating boundaries between yourself and the client. You need to communicate very clearly about everything that you're going to be doing. Never assume. So one of the things I learned throughout my career is never assume that your client is thinking this or expects this or understands this. Make sure anything that you are not sure of, anything you think, oh, I'm sure they understand. No, make sure you're explaining it to your client. Make sure they understand precisely what you're thinking and what you're going to be delivering, when you're going to be delivering it, to the quality and to the cost of that as well. And I think honesty and transparency goes a long, long way. So if you've made a mistake, make sure you come up and say, that was my mistake, and this is the solution. This is how I'm going to resolve it. Be honest. If there is a technical issue, and that happens, sometimes some things happen that are just out of your hand, out of control, out of your hands. And that's okay. That's just the nature of the job. I think that happens in every industry. It's not just the visual effects industry, but it happens everywhere. So when something happens, make sure you communicate that with your client. Okay, we can't deliver this today or tomorrow or next week because of the following reasons. However, we are looking into it. This is where communication, writing your emails, setting meetings in order to go through those emails, making sure you're doing your background work, working with your team and your VFX supervisor to come up with solutions that you can then propose to the client. So very important is communication. Secondly, going in is the managing expectations. Educating the client, as I said, is important. Making sure they understand what the processes are. If they're asking for creatures, a bird or a dinosaur or whatever it is that is being made, before you tell the client, oh, it's going to probably take 3 weeks, make sure you go to your team, you talk to your VFX supervisor, you understand how long the process is going to take, because every asset is going to be different, every shot is going to be different. You need to make sure you're always communicating with your team before you give an answer to your client. Because the worst thing a visual effects producer can do is say, we will have that in 3 weeks. And then you go back to your team and they tell you there is no way in hell that is going to be achieved in 3 weeks. It's going to take 3 months. Then you have to go back to the client and say, I'm sorry, my mistake. It's going to take 3 months. And that's a lot of the time that's when you lose clients, because you've overpromised something that actually there's no way you can achieve, and you look bad in the eyes of the client. So you make sure you're always communicating with both your team and the client, and there's clear transparency between both that you're managing. In terms of managing scope of work, so the client might come to you and say, okay, we had these 30 shots that we were giving to another company. Now they can't handle it. Can you handle this level of work? This is just one example. You have to, again, communicate with your team. Understand that if your team even has the capacity, if they're able to manage additional 30 shots of workload to come in, it's always, the company will always want more work. So top management will probably pressure you to take the work on because it's more profits for them. But you have to also be able to protect your team and protect their sanity from taking too much work. Because if they're taking too much work, you're pressuring them too much, then their stress is going to affect the level of quality that they're going to be able to deliver. And in the end, you're not going to be able to deliver on the expectations, which means you're going to look bad. So it's always about making sure if they want you to do more work, it's about understanding, can you handle that much work? Can your team handle it? What are the other creative ways in which we can take this work on? Can we maybe outsource this work to another company that would work with your company to deliver that? But that means you are, again, managing an additional 30 shots. Can you handle that? So make sure you're also asking yourself that question, because another 30 shots or another 10 shots is more stress for you and your management team, which is yourself, your VFX coordinator, and your VFX supervisor to also handle. So those are things that you also need to look out for as a VFX producer. Now, in terms of kind of fostering collaboration and trust, I think building trust between your client is important for you as a VFX producer. When you finish your job here, your client might just hire you to do another job for them because they like the way you handle their work. So the way you build your portfolio is by working with clients, delivering great projects on time, meeting their deadlines, and then they hire you to do another job. So if once you finish your contract here, the very client that came to them might hire you to do something else, and again, and so forth. So you're building your database of your clients that will always want to work with you. So it's, again, very important that you build trust, transparency, and you collaborate with the client. So if there is an issue, you want your client to feel free to come to you and say, look, we don't like the quality of the work you're delivering, but we want to still work with you. What solutions do you have? That's them trusting you because you've been transparent with them. You've shown them that you're able to manage things very well. It just, for some purposes, they don't like the quality. Now they're asking you, how can you collaborate with them to produce better results? So that, again, comes to trusting you and you building transparency and telling them when things are wrong, celebrating with them when things are great. So if the client says, I loved the last 20 shots you submitted, they're all fantastic, celebrate that with them. Be very happy, celebrate that with your team, let your team know that they've achieved a great milestone, that the client is very happy. Motivate them. So keeping that motivation between the team is very crucial. Be positive. I think another part of it is being positive is, as a producer, you take on a lot of stress. You cannot show that you're depressed or you are under too much stress or pressure. You have to find a way. I mean, you either go and work out, you have coffee breaks, however it is that you release that stress. But in front of a client, you have to be positive always. Always, okay, that's an issue. We understand. That's accept the problem. Okay, that's my misunderstanding, or that was my issue. but here are solutions. So keeping a positive mind will always allow you to see opportunities. Whereas if you're always, oh my God, I don't know what to say, I'm very sorry. And, sometimes you'll be in that position and that's okay. But try to remember when you're with a client, try to keep a positive face. Sometimes it's impossible, but try to smile anyway and try to understand that there is always a solution. So I think keeping that positive vibe with the client is very, very important.
Yeah, well,
Last,
thank you.
yeah, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, yes, it's the clients, our everything. And well, I truly support the idea of being transparent and communicative. And even if you think that if you are afraid of asking a kind of stupid question, it's always better to ask, because if you don't, you will end up redoing, I don't know, a lot sometimes. So yeah, clear communication, openness, I think that's the key. So thank you. And well, I'm also thinking well about the variety of skills for the job. Yeah, so actually basing on the amount of skills required for this, it's crucial to have really well profound education in the field. And I know you have a course. I know you have a course. And I wanted to ask, when you were creating your course, how did you approach all this variability, all this complexity of VFX producer? So how you build it, well, the logic to teach people this profession.
Absolutely, yeah. So we created a course for visual effects producing. It's happening on March 25th, I believe. And I've taken all of the years of experience I've had and working with major producers on films and visual effects producers who've had, talking 30, 40 years experience. So double the experience that I've had. And I've compiled all of that knowledge that I've gained over the years into a 2-month course that's going to teach junior visual effects producers, junior coordinators, and generally anyone who wants to get into the industry, the necessary skills of how to manage, high-level projects, how to build these Excel sheets, how to look into shot grid, giving them essential skills about the softwares that we use, building their soft skills, building their hard skills, how to deal with clients, so going really in depth about various different situations you will have as with different types of clients. Really, this is also for entrepreneurs. I think visual effects producing, you learn just as much about how to almost run your own business. When you're a VFX producer, you're managing almost the same aspects as a producer. You're in charge of a lot of people, you're in charge of a lot of money, and you're in charge of making sure your company is hitting the profit margin. So this course is catered to giving you all of that knowledge that I have, and also giving you the first set of skills that when you enter the industry, you're entering the industry to become an effective visual effects producer. Now, another part of this course that we've created is that we are looking to create an opportunity for the students to join my company, that we're doing many projects over the next 5 years. We've contracted huge amounts of projects, and what we wanted to do is bring these students in as interns, and possibly hire 2 interns as junior VFX coordinators into our team as well, to work with our team and to grow these individuals' set of skills. So we're creating a very unique course. It hasn't been done before. There really isn't a VFX producing course out there. So this is the first of its kind. And that's starting on March 25th. It's going to be great. I mean, I've gathered not only information from myself, but from many other producers to create this very intense 8 weeks course for VFX producing.
Well, thank you for answering. And I have actually so many questions from the chat, and I really love this one. Is Oscar statue is heavy or not?
It's quite heavy. It's made of steel and gold. It used to be made out of gold. Now they're still heavy. They're made of pure steel. So not too heavy, but you know, it's quite heavy. Something to hold on to well. Yeah.
And well, actually, if we talk also about the market, this year, and well, probably some prediction for the upcoming years. Well, for us, it's all kind of obvious that lately we have very different problems in the industry. Well, COVID gave us one thing. Now with global economy shifting, we have another story. Also, we can't ignore like a lot of news about some reductions and stuff like that. So, but at the same time, we have statistics. I actually checked it. I think a couple of weeks ago, I gave another webinar for our students, and I checked the statistics, and it's actually promising that every year we will have more and more money, more and more projects. What do you think about it? So, according to your feeling, how the industry will feel this year and next year?
Yeah, I mean, yes, you're right. Every year, more and more projects are scheduled to come out. So that means more and more. There's a bigger demand for VFX every year, especially since 2020, and because of the streaming services, you know, Netflix, Amazon, Apple, and many others, Hulu. They've taken the market now, which means they are always looking to create content because of the audiences. So they need to keep their subscribers in, and in order to keep their subscribers, they need to release more content, very much like a social media influencer, where the more subscribers they have, the more content they need to release, and the more engaging content they need to release. That being said, with the advancements of technology, and obviously we had the strikes last year where Hollywood came to a complete standstill, and that was not good for visual effects and post-production companies. Many visual effects companies around the world and many post-production companies around the world actually went bankrupt because there was no projects, and any projects that they were working on was held for about 6 months. Even now, the industry is still struggling to wake up from that because of AI advancements, because of AI replacing a lot of artists. A lot of, as I mentioned earlier, you look at Match Move, you look at Roto, you even look at parts of animation. AI has already taken huge chunks of those departments out, and it's continuing to move into other departments. We're talking about with an advancements of something like AI Sora. That is, I mean, it's amazing, and we're at the very beginning of it. So I wouldn't say it's going to replace a lot of what visual effects and post-production does right now. But if you're looking at the next 3 years, the advancements and how quickly AI is moving and how quickly it's advancing, it could potentially be replacing a lot of artists, a lot of departments. We are looking at reduction of artists needed per studio, which means there is going to be a problem with artists where they are right now and finding work and finding jobs in general. There will be shortage of that. Even though there is an increase in the amount of work, there is going to be a reduction in the amount of artists required. I heavily advise artists to begin developing new skills, whether that is creating their own content online, so becoming an influencer, creating, finding their niche on the market and marketing themselves that way, or getting into more of a visual effects producer and VFX coordinator kind of roles, where our roles will not be affected so much with AI, so much that the artists are, because we still need to manage the projects and we still need to manage all of the different dynamics, whether that's managing artists, managing higher management, or managing clients. There still isn't an AI that can replace us. What we will do as producers more is finding more efficient and more cost-effective ways of delivering projects. And to do that means we reduce the amount of artists, increase the amount of technological reliance, so relying on AI to help me achieve so on and so forth. That increases, whereas that reduces. So over the next few years, it's a scary time for visual effects artists. They need to be upskilling themselves in order to stay relevant. So yeah, I hope that answered your question.
And actually one of the questions we have is about AI tools. And well, there are many theories how everything can go, how fast, how slow. What's your opinion? How, I don't know, the pipeline of VFX artists, for example, can look like in 5 years?
The concept of, I mean, we really have to look at the economics of where, just to give an example of another industry that was heavily affected by the advancements of technology and AI, and then I will come back to our industry, is the construction industry, building buildings, building houses. Right now you have robots that are using AI to build houses in under 24 hours, 48 hours. They're able to build houses, and all you need is one project manager and maybe a few site managers just to make sure things are going right. So typically you would use maybe 30 or 40 people to hire to build a house, typically in construction. Now, and these robots are becoming more and more used now in construction in certain parts of the world, like in Dubai or in Saudi Arabia, or even in Scandinavian countries like Sweden and Switzerland. You have these robots that have taken over the job almost entirely. You have previously 30 or 40 people, now you have 3 people on site. So in the same way, our industry is going to be affected and is being affected right now. It is quite scary, but in the next 5 to 10 years, I imagine studios will have more management people, so that would be more VFX producers and coordinators than artists, purely because AI and technology will be replacing 80 to 90% of the workforce of visual effects artists, modeling, asset creation, storyboarding, concept arts. You may have one person or 2 people per department, rather than having 10 modelers. I would just have maybe 2 lead modelers, senior modelers, who would build their assets using AI and do some cleaning here and there on the assets. But generally, I don't need a team of modelers anymore. In the same way, I don't need a team of match move artists. So in India, you will have a company that has like 800 or 400 artists of match move, roto, and paint work. They are not needed anymore. Almost immediately today, right now, I don't need those companies necessarily. Obviously, if I have a huge project, I may still hire them right now, but bulk of my work right now, I don't need them. So in the next 2 or 3 years, those companies will become completely redundant, not needed, because AI would simply do the job for us. We would select which characters, which items that we require to be rotoed, or what scenes need to be match moved, and AI would do that for us. So it's a scary time for artists. If you're not relevant, if you're not upskilling yourself, if you're not perhaps moving into more of a managerial your position as an artist is vulnerable towards AI. So yeah.
And why you decided to become producer, not an artist?
Good question. I was leading my own company, so for some time I was an artist, I was a producer, I was everything. As when you're a startup or an entrepreneur, you do everything you can, and I love to be an artist. I love the creativity that I can put into. I got into effects because I love destroying stuff. I love creating huge waterfalls. I love creating explosions, blood effects. I loved all of that, and having creativity in movies to do that was really awesome. But I got more into a producer role because as my company expanded, I need to take more of a managerial level and to manage bigger aspects, to manage my clients more and manage my team more. I couldn't be more involved. I couldn't get more involved into the really creative works as an artist. So my role as a producer started really from there, and it started to continue to expand. And secondly, being a producer, you're involved in the higher conversation, so you have a bigger impact into where the direction of the project goes than when you're as an artist. As an artist, it's really the fun of it is about the creativity and how powerful you are as a creator in your niche. But as a producer, you have a bigger say in the project. You are managing clients more. You're involved in bigger talks about the direction of the project than as an artist. And I like that a lot more. And it also gave me the opportunity to meet very influential people, big directors, big producers, and build those relationships that allowed me to then build bigger company, bigger studios, then get involved into finance of them, be getting involved into the actual creation of projects and working with top directors and top writers to bring projects together and produce those projects. So that's what producing has allowed me to do, is to get involved into the bigger conversation of projects, getting involved into investment of projects, getting involved in the nature and the creation and the creative, top line creative of a project. And that's what attracted me towards getting more and more involved. So yeah, I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, are there many artists, or at least one, in your studio from Russia, for example? Have you worked with Russian teams, probably?
Yes. Actually, in 2021, I came to Russia, Moscow, with my wife, and we started a part of our studio, AMG Russia, in Russia, and we were doing several projects in Russia, and we were bringing some projects from outside of Russia for our Russian team to work with. So we were working with a number of artists from Russia, and it was a great experience and a great pleasure working with people from the region. So yes.
Cool. And okay, who should I don't know, a junior kill to get an option to get to your studio and work with your team? Is it possible somehow?
It is possible. We are taking on a lot of. So again, one of the reasons I set up the VFX producing course is to give opportunity for, again, as I mentioned, upskilling yourself. So whether you're an artist or whether you're a producer or a coordinator or someone that's completely new to the industry, and you want to work with me, you want to work with my team and work for the next few years, perhaps with us on the many projects that are coming up, then this course would be one way of getting in touch and showing your skills and making sure you're learning from me. And when you've learned from me, I know I can trust you with a level of work that I can give to you, whether you're as an intern or coming on board as a junior VFX coordinator. But as an artist, you can either join the VFX coordinator, or we will be posting requirements for certain VFX artists over the next, I would say, 2 to 3 months. We'll be putting those job requirements on our website, so you can, by all means, apply for them through that. So yeah, these are a number of ways in which you can be in contact with me or begin to work with our team.
Well, what amazing. I think a lot of our listeners will be super happy to hear this. And of course, when we all start our career, we make mistakes. What mistakes did you make, and what you would advise to the beginners in the industry?
Oh my gosh, mistakes. I think I built my career on my mistakes. I think you have to, in any career you take, you will always make mistakes, but mistakes are a step for you to get closer to becoming better and step closer to your ultimate dream, whether that's to become a VFX producer or becoming an executive producer or becoming a lead artist or so on. So mistakes are part of, and I'm proud to have made those mistakes and have learned from them. I've made many. Some of those mistakes are I've miscommunicated with the client. I try to not to be honest with them because I thought I could keep the mistake that was made by my team or by myself away from the client, and I could handle dealing with it internally, and that worked against me actually because it took a lot longer for me to handle that process internally, and I had to lie to my clients about why it's taking so long, and that became very messy, and I lost clients that way. Another way is I wasn't as organized as I should have been on certain projects because I was still learning. I was a junior. And that was, again, it wasn't that I lost clients, it's just the project cost more. And because I didn't organize the project properly, it hit the profit margins of the projects. And that had a big effect on obviously how my company was surviving at the time. It was based off of profits. And if we are eating into our profits, then I have less profits to share with my board and my partners as well. So being organized is definitely something you will learn. You will make mistakes. As a VFX producer, you will make mistakes, and that is okay. You have to make those mistakes in order to learn from them. And when you learn from them, you will never repeat them again because you're in the middle of the client shouting at you, or your higher management shouting at you, or your team is shouting at you because you forgot to mention something that the client wanted to your team. So again, paying attention to detail is very crucial as a visual effects producer, is to really hear and make notes of what your client wants and make sure you're delivering that. If you've missed something and in the last second the client goes, oh, but where is this thing? And then you're like, oh my God, I forgot about that. Now I have to go back to the team and tell them, guys, we got another 2-3 days of work to do because I forgot to mention to you about this piece of work. So being organized, paying attention to detail, listening to your client, being honest, these are all lessons that I had to learn the hard way. And what I'm teaching and what I'm mentioning now, these are very crucial things that as a senior VFX artist, you will experience throughout your career. And it's okay. Again, mistakes are what make you stronger. So those were my mistakes.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. That's super valuable. And my last question. I know that I've been torturing you for 2 hours already, so that will
It's
be
been
the last
fun.
one.
It's been great, not to worry.
What is the most favorite and rewarding project in your career?
There's been a lot of rewarding projects, but the last rewarding project, that's a good question. I think a recent rewarding project was a film called Argyle. And the reason it was very rewarding because it was it was a great project to work on, and it came with many difficulties in itself. So the way it was shot caused issues during VFX and post-production. So it caused a lot of challenges. There was a lot of dynamics to the project, a lot of back and forth with the client and with the team, trying to make sure we're getting that delivery and we're delivering what the client wanted on time. So Argyle was I think, the most rewarding and the most challenging, most recent work that I have done. And I don't know if the audiences have seen the film, but I hope you have. It was an enjoyable project to work on.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing. Well, it was super nice, super cool to have you for these 2 hours. You shared like a lot of stuff. And well, really thank you so much. If you don't mind, I switch to Russian to also explain our students some technical stuff and what we will share after the webinar, that they will also get a magic link with some useful stuff. So it will be easier just to do in Russia. And yeah, again, thank you so much. Amazing experience and super. I'm actually thinking probably I should switch from advertising to VFX and movie producing. So yeah,
It's fun, but thank you for having me. It's been a really big pleasure for me as well. I'm going through everything with you. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you so much. И да, ребят, мы сейчас на русский переключаемся. Мы поблагодарили нашего спикера. Мы не успели задать все вопросы прямо с чата, их много. Вот. Чат немножко не про то. Но мы еще после вебинара, я правда не знаю когда, может быть, организаторы тут подключатся и мне помогут с ответом, вышлем волшебную ссылку там с презой и с какой-то еще доп. Информацией. Вот, то есть скоро ждите, скоро будет. Лёш, может, ты знаешь, когда будет ссылка? Нет. Видимо, нет.
Алло, да, я могу подключиться. В принципе, уже разместили в чате в Ютубе, и потом в описании видео то же самое добавим ссылочкой на Google Диск. Там все, в принципе, будет.
Супер. Отлично. Вот, ребят, тогда всем большое спасибо, что были с нами. Я надеюсь, вам понравилось. Ой, очень крутой. Прям вообще, я прям сама сижу, думаю, не пойти ли в VFX теперь. Вот, я надеюсь, вам понравилось. Вот, и оставайтесь на связи, у нас еще впереди много всяких интересных штук будет. Вот.
Подтверждаю. Всем спасибо. Пойя, thank you very much. It was very cool and interesting.
Yeah, thank you so much.